Does everybody see my screen and your screen?
Negative.
No? Okay. Now you do?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just do a couple more review examples. You've all been doing pretty much the same things, but okay. No. Control G, quit. No. No. Oh, you do? The Emacs you can open? Let's just try this. We're going to create a sample file. One is you can open up the editors and then open a file within the editor. Others, if you know the file you're working with or you want to create a new one, like a sample, I can do that. So I'm going to do sudo vim sample. Well, actually, I'll do a vim sample. And now this is a new file called vim sample. It shows in the lower left-hand corner. This, oh, I didn't do the A first, and then this is a sample of vim. If I want to write this, I hit the escape key to get me into the execute mode or the command prompt or the command options, and the insert in the lower left-hand corner goes away. If I hold down the shift and do a colon W, I'm actually just writing that file, and so now it's been saved. I can go back and add more text to here, and like say I typed in A, and it's going to insert text after where I was, and this is another line. You can save and quit at the same time by hitting escape. It gets you out of the insert mode. Now I do the shift W for writing and Q for quit at the same time. It's going to take you out of Vim. I do an ls to see my directory listing, and there's my Vim sample. To open this file back up, I can go sudo vim sample, and it brings me up right where I was. I can view it here, scroll through it. If I wanted to edit it, I would have to go to insert mode. Again, you can hit A and just arrow to where you want to go and hit the new arrow, new line. Another new line. Saving again, hit escape. If I do the shift Q just to quit, it's going to say, well, you haven't actually saved it. Are you sure you want to quit? If you were sure you're going to quit, you do the Q exclamation mark point. That would force it without saving it. Otherwise, you do your :WQ for writing and then quitting. I'm going to try to open up that file using Emacs. So sudo Emacs and then vim sample. And it does bring it up. I didn't have to use a /. I did sudo. That's a difference. Yeah, doing sudo. So this file was created in Vim, but it's just a text file. So you can use it with any editor that you want. Now, I don't have to go into any text mode. I can just go where I want. This is a new line using Emacs. And now to save this, how do I save this? It's Control X and then Control S if you're looking on your little cheat sheet. So X means I want to execute a command, Control X. And you can see in the lower left-hand corner, it eventually comes up. It says there's Control X. I'm waiting for the next command to execute. And if I do a Control S, it save it. It actually says wrote that file. If I want to exit now, I do Control X. It's waiting for a command to execute. And Control C for close, it takes me out. I do an ls. There is, another copy, Vim sample. Let's go back into Vim. and you can see your document right there. I don't want to write anything to it. I just want to exit, :Q. And now if I want to get rid of these files, I certainly can. I get rid of them by using the rm vim sample. Actually, I'm going to say no. Remove the write protected. I'm going to say no. So it's not going to delete it. Let me try it with sudo. It just removes it, and I do ls, and I just have the one with the tilde. Sudo again, because the super user created the document, it's going to mark it as saying, hey, normal users can't delete it automatically. Let me at least mark it as read-only so that you have to answer something yes or no. So if you do sudo, it's not going to ask you. So vim sample tilde. To a ls, there's nothing there. If you want to be more extensive, just using the commands, I can make a directory called, directory 1. I do an ls, and I consider directory 1. Change directory to directory 1. I'm in the directory 1 directory, and now you can make new documents in there if you wanted to. cd ... and then rmdir1. Oh, not remove. rmdir. There you go. Thank you. It's rmdir to get rid of a directory. Rm is removing a file. Rmdir is removing a directory. Correct. Just like the bottom command is here. Remove directory, directory 1. I do an ls now, and directory 1 won't be there. None of my files will be there. You can use Vim or Emacs for any of the things we're doing in class. As we look at some of the configuration files or the host file or their different files. Even playing back and forth and seeing what the differences are, sort of get your mind in that mindset. Like I said, the one example that we will be looking at later today is the etc hosts file. Here's what's in there right now. We might modify it, change it, whatever we want to do. So that's what it looks like in Vim. :Q. Oh, this is Vim. Yeah. :Q gets me out of there. I can do the same thing with Emacs, etc hosts, and there's an Emacs. Control X, Control C takes me out of there. Do a clear so it's not so messy on the screen. That's what you have. Daniel.
Just so you're aware, you could also pass the -R option to RM, and that'll delete files as well. The recursive.
The rmdir?
Yeah. No, not
RM.
RM-R will delete directories.
Oh, we'll delete directories as well as files. Got it. So if you do an rm-r, it'll do the directory and the files in that directory. And okay. Okay. So questions or comments on the editors? Okay. Practice them. Look at them. I'm sure not many of you use it very often over this last summer. How many of you used any kind of GNU text-based editor over the summer? You think? Okay, one person. The other person is completely lying. Yeah. Okay. As we get into it, you'll sort of hopefully remember some of the stuff. Okay, chapter 4 in our reference guide, in the server guide. I'm sort of going to read through some of the stuff in the manual, and then where it does have different commands, we'll just type them just to get them into there, just to see how they function. A lot of this stuff should be review since you are networking. Many of you are networking students. So a network consists of 2 or more devices, such as computer systems, printers, and related equipment, which are connected by either physical cabling or wireless links for the purpose of sharing and distributing information. In fact, let me see if I can get this up here. Ubuntu ships with another number of graphical utilities to configure your network. This document is geared towards server administrators and will focus on managing your network on the command line. So again, being a server administrator, if we want it super efficient and not having that overhead of a GUI, you need to be familiar with this. Also, like we said, when we have remote connections, many of them are. You're really not doing a remote desktop or remote connection that way. You are sending commands across, and so knowing the commands is the only way you'll be able to interact with some of those functions. Ethernet interfaces. Ethernet interfaces are identified in the system by ETHX, where X is the number of the device. If I have 10 Ethernet devices on my network, on my device, on my server, it'll be listed ETH 0 through 9. Everything in computers starts as 0 because 0 is an actual value. So why would we skip it? Identifying your Ethernet interfaces, you use ifconfig-a. -a means everything. grep, what does grep do? Searches, or sometimes we think of it as like filtering. It's going to filter or search based on Ethernet. So if I just do an ifconfig, can type ifconfig-a pipe grep ETH, is going to find anything with Ethernet on there. In this case, I only have one Ethernet adapter. If I had 2 or 3, which is very, very common in servers, at least 2, you would see Ethernet 0 and Ethernet 1. It does give you your MAC address of that device, that NIC, so so you can actually figure out if you're looking at the NIC, which one's 0 and which one's 1. If you look in the back of the box, you really can't tell. They kind of look the same. They're not listed as ETH0 and ETH1, but knowing their hardware MAC address might be able to distinguish between there. Another application that can help you identify all network interfaces available in your system is the LSHW, or kind of like LS, which is like showing, and then hardware. In the example below, LSHW shows a single Ethernet interface with the logical name of ETH0. So if I do sudo LSHW, and it's looking for, LSHW, class network. Takes a second to scan. And then it shows you. A little bit more detailed than the ifconfig. ifconfig pretty much tells you you have Ethernet and an Ethernet adapter, and this is the MAC address. Here's a second Ethernet adapter, and here's the MAC address. This has a lot more information in it. It's going to give you the product. It's an 82545EM gigabit Ethernet controller. It's made by Intel. More information. The serial number is the MAC address. It's capable of doing 1 gigabit per second, 64 bits, clock speed 66 megahertz, and then so on and so forth, other capabilities and functions. Section 1.1.2, Ethernet interface logical names. Interface logical names are configured in the basically persistent net rules file. If you would like to control which interface receives a particular name, you can find that line in the interfaces, and then you can change it in there. We're not going to change it, but let's take a look and see what's in that directory, and in that file. So I'm going to use sudo, and I'll just use vim for this example. So it's etc udev, and then rules, and then 70, persistent, dash net rules. The tab complete does work while you're doing these commands as well. So as you start typing 70, you can hit tab, or as you start typing rules, RU tab. So it's kind of nice. So I think that's it. If I hit enter, this is where you would put it. The file maintains persistent names for network interfaces, and they give you the format in the document. So name equals ETHX the desired logical name. I'm just going to hit A on here. I'm actually not going to save this. I don't know. NIC1 equals ETH0. So any reference to the Ethernet 0 connection, which is your first Ethernet connection, you could also refer to as NIC1. It sort of makes the same name. I'll hit escape to get out of the insert mode, and then do my Shift Q and then an exclamation mark, because I know I want to quit without saving. Hit escape to get out of the edit mode. So it gets rid of the insert in the lower left-hand corner. Then :Q exclamation mark. I probably do say that because I'm holding down Shift as I'm doing colon, so I probably say Shift. So ignore what I'm saying and just, yeah. I know I do that, so I do Shift Q. No, :Q. But as you hold down one key, it's really hard to say another one. It's sort of like, you ever see those posters where there's like the words red, blue, green, but the colors are different. So red is actually a blue, and then you're supposed to like look at the word and say the color, and you keep reading the word. Okay, so thank you for catching me on that, and I'll try to be more careful. The Ethernet interface settings. There's a tool called F-Tool, or Ethernet tool, that is a program that displays and changes Ethernet card settings, such as the auto negotiation, the port speed, duplex mode, and wake on LAN, and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully you're familiar with all what those things are, not that you're saying, what's duplex? Or this whole port speed? That's your 10, 100, 1000? We good with that? Okay, we actually need to install that first. So we are going to, I'm going to clear the screen to make it look nicer. And we'll do sudo apt-get, and then we're going to install it right away. And it's called ETH tool. And it asks if you want to install it. Actually, it doesn't. It's really quick. I guess it's done. Yes, Emacs 23, and then this one, ETH tool. And previously unpacking ETH tool, processing triggers, setting up ETH tool. Okay, to run ETH tool, we type in sudo, and then ETH tool, and we need to tell it what NIC we actually want to work with, which Ethernet port we want to administer. We only have one, so it makes it really easy for ETH0. And right now it's just going to show us the information, all the settings. So it's supported. What does this NIC support? It supports 10 base T, 100 base T, and 1000 base T. Well, what levels? For 10 and 100, it can do half and full, and for 1000 base T, it only supports full. Let's see, advertise is going to look the same. What's it right now? Right now it's running at gigabit full. It's a twisted pair connection. Wake on LAN is disabled. And let's see, what's something else? Auto negotiate is on, so it's depending on what NIC it's going into. I'm sorry, what port it's going to on a switch. So if the switch is set at 100, this will auto negotiate. We can turn this off or disable it and then force it to be at a certain speed, but you know all the ramifications of that. You have to make sure that your two ends match if you don't have them auto negotiate. It is actually more efficient to have them not auto negotiate. It is the most efficient network if you force, especially link speed and duplexing, to be a certain way, because then it's not looking or thinking or whatever. So that's a way of working with that. If you use the ETH tool to make changes, it's only temporary and be lost after the reboot. If you'd like to retain the settings, they show you on that. It's on page 34 of the server guide. You edit the file at the network interfaces, and then they show you how to change that. the command is pre-up is what you have to be changing. Just to go into another file, we'll do sudo emacs, and we'll take a look at that network interfaces file. So etc network interfaces, sudo emacs etc network interfaces. And you can see what's in there right now. And like I said, if you want to change anything permanently, you could go in here and follow the steps on page 34 of adding that text in there. To get on out of Emacs, since I'm done looking at this, is how again? Control X, Control C. Excellent. And I'll do clear. Okay, the next part of this chapter, chapter 4, is IP addressing. The following section describes the process of configuring your system's IP address and default gateway needed for communicating in a local area network. I really wish I had a third screen. Okay, I'm going to diverge a little bit from the manual in here just to show you a little bit more clearly what's kind of happening. If you want to see your current configuration, we're used to ipconfig. We probably typed in ipconfig on your Windows computer for several thousand times in your life. It's ifconfig in the GNU Linux world, so that's when we get used to. So ifconfig, and if you want to see it for a specific adapter, you type in the adapter, like Ethernet 1, Ethernet 2, or Ethernet 0 in this case. So ifconfig Ethernet 0. And it tells you a lot of the same information you just saw before in that, well, I shouldn't say a lot. It tells me some of the same information, such as it's an Ethernet adapter, and this is my MAC address. Other than that, most of this stuff is dealing with the IP addressing itself. You do have IP version 4 addressing in here, and you have IP version 6 in here as well. We're not getting into IP version 6 at all in this class. We're using everything IP version 4 still. This is not necessarily, the same concepts apply. You just use iNet 6 instead of iNet. If I wanted to make a new IP address, I actually do the command using the ifconfig command as well. So if I just do ifconfig with the Ethernet adapter, it just tells me what I currently have. I can also use it just like ipconfig, like for release renew, I can make new ones as well. So for Ethernet 0, actually I need to go back and I need to add sudo to this, because I need the super user to do this, super user do, ifconfig Ethernet 0. You can see my current IP address is 192.168.230.132. I want to now make it 10.0.0.100. Well, IP addresses on on their own are meaningless without a subnet mask. The command we use here is netmask. So we don't type in subnet mask, it's netmask. And then we have to type it in because 255.255.255.0 is a completely different address. This 10.0.0.100 is completely different if I say 255.255.255.0 or if I end up saying 255.255.0.0. Completely different address. It looks the same as saying, well, it's just the subnet's different. It's not. It's a completely different address. So those two always, always, always go hand in hand. And now I hit enter on here, and again, it doesn't tell you like, oh, succeeded, or your new address is whatever. It just, so like no news is good news. If there's an error, it would tell you. If nothing pops up, it probably worked, but how am I going to confirm this? Well, I can do an ifconfig Ethernet 0, and I can see that, in fact, I do have my new IP address. So I was 192.168. I am now at 10. Okay, what's something else that we work with when we work with IP addresses. That's kind of important. IP addresses and subnet masks go absolutely together. They cannot ever be separated. What's probably the next most important thing? Default gateway. How do I get off of my network? Well, to see what routes you have, oh, excuse me. To see what routes you have, you can do a route command. Route-n. And because I'm a 10, I told it that I'm using a network, an IP address of 10.0.0.100 with a mask of 255.255.255.0. It knows that my current network is 10.0.0.0. It has to be. That's, you figure this whole out by using the subnet mask. You figure out which network you're on. So it's saying if you want to write to something on this network, well, you don't have to go anywhere because this is that network. What if you want to add a new network? What if you actually want to get off of your current network and go someplace else? You might be interested in doing that. That's where you're going to add a route. To do that, anytime we actually make any changes, we do sudo. A lot of these other commands we can run without running sudo, just to view information. But if we want to change information, I'm going to do sudo route add. And I want to have a default gateway, so default space GW. Well, what's my default gateway going to be? It could be anything. Most often, more often than not, is the first IP address on that network, so 10.0.0.1. That's not the same in our virtual world. In our natting virtual world, our default gateway is actually 192.168.230.2. Doesn't matter what your default gateway is. You just have to define it here. So where do I go to get off of this network? And which adapter am I talking about? I need to add the adapter at the end. So sudo route add default gateway 10.0.0.1 to Ethernet 0. It's in the book. So, okay. And now hit enter. And again, no news is good news. Let's take a look at those routes. Now you can see that if I'm accessing, so I'm currently on this network. If I'm accessing something in the 10 network range, it's just going to stay here. So it's not going to go anywhere. However, if it's on any other network, 0.0.0.0 is any other network. So if I'm looking for a 127 network or a 256 network or a 13 network, it's going somewhere else. How do I get there? I go out this way. And I could have multiples of these. I could actually say if I'm going to a specific network, like 15, I'll use this gateway. If I want to go to 20, I'll use this gateway or whatever. So this is your routing table. But this is my default. By choosing default gateway, that means unless it's defined, so everything that's not defined is going to get dumped out to this address. But this is your general routing table. Okay. Well, so how do let's see, how do I get rid of all this stuff? It's like I have all these IP addresses. Well, that's great, but now I can't, I can't get anywhere really. If I tried pinging www.google.com, I'm not getting anywhere because it's not my IP address. That's not the right network. Even if it was the right IP address, that's the wrong default gateway. How do I clear all this stuff out? By the way, right now I did a ping. It's not coming back with anything. Control-C is a really good command to break out of things. We ran into that, I think, with Adam or something. It went somewhere, not sure where. Control-C, is a really good option to try to get out of there. Well, in ipconfig, we have a release, so get rid of all information. What we do under GNU is using an IP address flush. And then what am I doing this for is Ethernet 0. sudo IP address flush Ethernet 0. Now if I do an ifconfig, I have nothing. I have no IP address, 4 or 6, default gateway route, nothing. It's all gone. It's all been flushed. How do I get one back? There isn't really a renew command. The easiest, one way is to manually go in and figure out what your network was and put all those addresses back in. The other way is just actually turning off the adapter and bringing it back on. It's sort of like on your computer, unplug the network cable and then plug it back in, or the little button for wireless, turn off your wireless and turn it back on. We're going to do the same thing. Again, we're using the sudo command because we're doing something. I want to down that interface. So interface down, Ethernet 0. I'm actually disconnecting it. If I looked at my available connections right now, I'd show that I have no Ethernet connections. I bring it back up. When it brings it back up online, because all those configuration files are listed for use DHCP and auto negotiate and all that kind of stuff, it's going to come up with all those defaults automatically. Now if I do an ifconfig, it's going to show me that I have a 192.168.230.132, which is a DHCP address. And if I do a route, it's showing me that if I'm existing on this network, I don't go anywhere, but my default gateway, so all other networks are going to go out here. And that is our network, 192.168.230.2. Now let's try pinging. I'm able to ping successfully Google. So everything's back online and working fine. Questions or comments on that section up through IP addressing so far? A lot of commands, a lot of jumping around. It's just letting you be aware, familiar where they are. I'm not requiring that you memorize them. Having a sheet with them, like saying if I want to change the IP address or see the IP addresses, that's what I type. How do I, statically assign it, at least temporarily? Just a little note sheet might come in handy to work with that. So, other questions or comments? Ping goes forever. You do have to do Control-C to get out of that one. Through the options, you can force it to say, I want it to do 20 times, 3 times, whatever. You can even make it how big the packets are. So you have like a jumbo packet, this like mega monster, packet size. And so you chose 43? Oh, stopped at 43. Let me just double check here. Actually, I was going to give you a break right now. Just give me one more second. I just want to finish up this 1.2 section, which is the loopback interfaces. Loopbacks are just, the 172.0.0.1, 127.0.0.1. If I ping it, I can ping 127.0.0.1. That just means that the adapter is there, that the IP protocol is there, and it's all working. To see just like I do an ifconfig on Ethernet 0, ifconfig on Ethernet 0, it shows me the information about that. I can also do an ifconfig on my local loopback, and the abbreviation in this world is LO, local loopback. So ifconfig LO. You can see that's 127.0.0.1. And if anybody knows, the home or local loopback for IP version 6 It is ::1, and that's showing right there. ::1. If I take just the last thing in the book here is sudo emacs. If I take a look at the interfaces direct file, there should be etc network interfaces. You can see that information right here. Auto LO for local loopback, the loopback network interfaces, and then the primary network interface is Ethernet 0. And this is where it's saying that I'm using DHCP. iNet is IP version 4. iNet 6 would be IP version 6 settings. So Control X, Control X, Control C, and clear. Okay, that finishes up with the IP section. Let's take a break. We'll come back and look at name resolution next.